People who ran into the weird kid from school years later. How did he or she turn out? My friend's dad told him about weird classmate he had. Nobody really took him seriously. When they were in their last grades, the kid decided that right after school he will be growing fungi instead of studying. Everyone laughed at him. And guess what? Right now he owns probably the largest organic farm business both in the country and most likely in the whole region. We had a kid that would do weird crap in front of other kids for attention. Climb into bins, eat old food out of the bins, let people throw yogurt over him, dive into bushes, that sort of thing. Otherwise he seemed mostly harmless. Ended up in prison for pouring a kettle of boiling water over a guy and a girl who he fancied. They were at a house party. He saw her talking to a guy, so he went to the kitchen, boiled the kettle, then calmly walked up to them and poured it over their heads. I'm not sure he had ever even spoken to her, but he was seemingly jealous that she was talking to another guy. Then after he was released from prison for that, he took his mother's car on a joyride with two of his mates, crashed into a car driven by an elderly couple, then ran off leaving his two mates dead and the elderly couple badly injured. I think he's still in prison for that. Not quite as bad, but we had another weird kid who would talk to no one and would spend all day drawing graffiti in a sketchbook, which he guarded with his life. Not good graffiti, he just kept drawing his tag in different fonts. I think it was aspect or some other badly spelt word. If he spoke, it was usually just to tell people how great he thought Banksy was. He ended up spraying this tag all over our small and otherwise graffiti-free English town, and was immediately arrested after his old teachers recognized it. I think the sketchbook was used as evidence. He was then arrested a second time for spraying his tag on the side of the courthouse in front of half a dozen CCTV cameras. I bumped into him a year or so back and he now works for a charity which runs a kids club in the next town over. He teaches kids how to skate and BMX as well as running street art classes where they legally decorate the skate park with graffiti. Glad the second guy got turned around. Good for him for finding a legal and helpful outlet. I wouldn't say I ran into him, but I occasionally drive past the penny kid walking around slumped in a leather jacket and greasy hair on a hot summer day. I really have no idea what he's doing with his life, but he still seems pretty weird. Back in high school he was always collecting change that he'd find on the ground, and I found out later he actually saved up $500 or so and donated it to charity. I thought a lot differently about him once I found out. Didn't run into him, but randomly saw a TED talk he gave on YouTube. He's a physicist now, and has been lobbying the government to increase funding for science education in order to ensure future generations can continue the fight against climate change. He's a way better person than I became. Read that, as he's a psychic now, and was really confused. One kid like that died in a car accident senior year. Everyone then pretended they were his best friend and that they were so sad, etc etc. These people basically freaking tortured this kid. Their reactions were disgustingly fake. I never realized how many phony monsters I knew until that happened. Luckily I never had to see those people again soon after. Same thing happened with my sister. So many people came out of the woodwork and acted like they were best friends. I'm like, WTF, my sister used to complain about how much she disliked, and now they're here acting like they hung out all the time. She was actually doing really well. I almost didn't recognize her because she looked so much different. She joined the military, so was cleaned up, in better shape, etc. and seemed like she was happy. Sadly she died in a car accident a year or so later. Well, crap. Girl in high school used to be really to herself. Super into anime, just assumed she was shy, so I'd make a point to have small chats with her every day until one day she said her pillow wasn't freaking her right. Apparently her pillow had conscience and she used it to masturbate. Graduated a few months later. Fast forward to about 3 months ago, I'm making coffee at a cafe when said girl walks up to me. She's super polite and bubbly, but as I ask how her day is going, she tells me the demon that had violated her was actually her guardian angel and she needed him around or something. Haven't seen her since. This was a wild ride. Saw on the news a while back he is doing 10 years in prison for violating his mentally disabled sister. Ran into the kid who was effectively the school bully. He wasn't a physical bully but made fun of everyone and was just mean in general. At the bank one day and I didn't even recognize him. He walks up to me holding his daughter and gave me a classic white guy well goddamn it. How the heck are ya? And this is gonna sound crazy but he legit became the nicest guy in the world. Extremely well adjusted, great family, great career. He invited me to go out to the driving range the following Sunday and for whatever reason I was inclined to go. Wound up hitting golf balls and smoking J's with him for most of the day and had a heart to heart. Turns out he was terribly abused his entire life and his father punished him by forcing him to stay awake all night. He was petrified to go home so he did whatever he could to get detention. Explains a lot. Never judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. There was a weird kid in my middle school who would eat hand sanitizer, cut his fingers and write 666 on the classroom walls with his blood, and other creepy things. Apparently, he had a crush on me and asked me to the 8th grade prom but I declined. Fast forward to the last day of middle school, I receive a message from him on Facebook saying he had a huge crush on me and that he would kill himself if I didn't feel the same. I told him that despite what he had just sent me, I wasn't interested. A few months later we start high school, but since there's 4 high schools in my area, a lot of us were scattered around and we ended up going to different schools. I never saw him again, but through Facebook I saw that he started a relationship with a girl that also attended our middle school. He looked really happy, and honestly I was happy for him. He seemed to have grown out of that weird middle school stage and genuinely seemed like a great guy. Around 2 years later, I was a junior in HS. I go to a local supermarket and just mind my business. The next day I receive a message from him on Facebook saying he was working at the supermarket and happened to see me. I messaged him back and apologized for not seeing him and saying hi. He then proceeded to apologize for all the weird middle school stuff and that message he had sent me on the last day of 8th grade. I told him all was fine and we left it at that. Now, by the looks of Facebook, he is a workout fanatic and his body has changed a lot. He also seems to be going to college and spends a lot of time with his family. I'm glad he's doing fine. I like that he apologized. The level of self-awareness that was needed to acknowledge that indeed, he had been on the weirder scale way back. From elementary school, weird girl with an antichrist vibe. I had a crush on her, never talked, punched other people but no one messed with her because somehow, we knew something was wrong with her. Found her Instagram some 3-4 years ago. She's a very good makeup artist, working for television and weddings. She really knows her stuff. From middle school, there was this guy who never talked. Also he always was like, smiling to himself, very tall. He literally disappeared. Family has been looking for years now, never been found to this day. Maybe had some mental issues. From high school, this awkward punk dude in my class who went off the grid for about 10 years. Found him last year through a common friend. Turns out he is gay and thought no one would accept him so he cut ties. After that he was in an abusive relationship and his BF didn't let him talk to anyone. Calmed down significantly and is happily married now. He acted out in school because he was being abused by his foster parents at home. Nobody knew at the time. They never do. This is why I get pee when people frick with weird people. You have no fricking clue why they're like that. IDK he keeps making crappy edits of Drew Pickles from the Rugrats going places around town and talking in a text-to-speech voice. Please share. He's a convicted debaucher and is on the registry for life. He lives in a halfway house and is pretty fricked up in general. Half of these are became successful in a lucrative career or violated and murdered a bag of puppies. There was this kid in junior high that was really quiet and had no friends at the time. One day my English teacher pulls me out of the classroom and asks me to befriend him because he didn't have friends. So I did and we became friends. We went to different high schools so kinda lost connection. He would text me every now and then. He found me on Facebook when he was working on his engineering degree. He is now married and works for SpaceX as an engineer. Weird kid I knew committed suicide about 6 weeks after we graduated. He renamed himself Green Dragon of the West. He's a network engineer, so okay I guess. The Green Dragon of the West rules over its copper wiring horde. He is still in jail for taking a prostitute out to the woods behind his parents' house and trying to kill her. He left her for dead but she came to after he left and got the heck out of there. There was this very weird kid who was known for masturbating in class in 8th grade and ended up dropping out of school. Last year I see on the news that he robbed a bank. He slid a note saying, "I have a gun. Give me all of your money," and the bank teller handed him a frick ton of $1 and $5 bills to stall while police showed up. He left before police arrived, but they found him shortly after because he left his entire handprint on the glass door when he pushed it open on his way out. Lol, for some reason I thought you were gonna say they found him shortly after masturbating. Still seems about the same. Natural dislike to anyone who tries to talk to him. Assumes everyone is out to get him. He's also put on about 100 pounds and he wasn't a small guy to begin with. I saw her at a con I was working, where she came up to my guest and was telling him about her book that she hadn't started writing but was due the next day and still had 10,000 words left to write. She also kept looking at her phone and dramatically sighing and saying things about how she wished her publisher would leave her alone. So still making up things to try and make herself look better. I'm doing fine and have not murdered anyone. Keep it up. I was the weird kid. Mum was never really around. No father figure. We lived in a half-renovated house with animal feces through it because my mum kept her dogs indoors 24/7. We were also extremely broke. Like mum would go hungry to feed my sister and I. My mother, on reflection, was mentally unwell due to the depression of losing her mum 2 years prior. She still hasn't recovered to this day. I realized years later my clothes probably smelt like animal feces all the time. I had very few friends in high school. I ended up getting into drugs at 13 to escape from my crap life, and I had no boundaries or restrictions from any parental figures. I also lived on my PlayStation and Game Boy due to not having any friends to actually spend time with, making me socially inept. Both my sister and I were eventually uplifted by welfare services and I ended up in a boys' home for 3 years, where I finally got the boundaries and basic care I needed. I had a great social worker who worked hard to set me up with a positive future despite my circumstances. I slowly gained social skills and realized I could have a normal life. After leaving school, I realized I had a strong work ethic that led me to work up to holding management positions in basically every business I've worked in since my early 20s. It also got me through university doing a Bachelor of Social Work. Now I'm a social worker supporting young adults to change the direction of their lives and to have a life they can be proud of. I've just been promoted to manage the service I work for and to grow the service so it can be extended to other districts. I guess I've done alright for myself when I look at where I've come from. Whoa, your story is eerily similar to my own. I'm a programmer now, and only have one kid, but otherwise. He's in prison for owning distributing over 1,000 images and videos of child pornography, most as young as infants and registered in the missing children database. Safe to say we all thought he was weird for a reason. He committed suicide before it ever got to years later. Just a few years after high school. I was glad we had been friendly and I had never been unkind to him. His family situation was horrendous and he couldn't escape the damage. He still wears a black trench coat and his black Napoleon Dynamite boots and trudges around down the streets. He still wears a black trench coat and his black Napoleon Dynamite boots and trudges around down the streets. Sounds normal for Portland. He was still wearing the same hoodie that he had every single day in high school, 5 years after graduation. I don't know what I'd expected, but it blew my mind. I'll buy it for life. They were twins. The eldest of the two is in prison for violation, assault, armed robbery and grand theft auto. The younger is the police officer who arrested him. The weird thing is that in high school they were the complete opposite of what they are now. Met the younger last year after 7 years of not seeing them. She moved to NY City and was one of the stars of a Broadway musical. Dear Evan Hansen. Pretty sure I was the weird kid, but runner-up was a very nice but shy girl who immigrated from China and loved computers but was incredibly meek. A conversation was like prying teeth, would only make strange noises in class, etc. And frankly, in hindsight, what little she said at the time makes me realize now she was in an emotionally abusive household. Example, she had some small role in a school play in middle school. I was happy for her when I saw that her mom came, as she said she doubted her mom would come. I asked afterwards and she said her mom said she looked like a sack of dog bones on the stage during her part. I legit did not know what to say when she said stuff like that because I was a kid myself. Fortunately I can say I know how she turned out and it's a happy ending. We went to the same college and she was originally signed up for pre-med because even though this gal was a computer whiz, her mom insisted she had to be a doctor. Within a year though she rebelled against everything and became a computer science major, the horror, and became a known source of advice for other kids of Asian descent in particular seeking to stand up to their parents' expectations. She's now a test engineer working for a household name computing company and posts pictures of international travel and various geeky hobbies. So I guess she was great once she could find herself, and most of the weirdness was imposed upon her. Heck yeah, good for her. I've told this before, but my dad told me about a kid he went to high school with who used to sit in the back of the class mumbling and giggling to himself all the time. Occasionally he'd pick his nose and eat the results. Despite this, my dad said, he was apparently really smart and got all A's. He told me the guy's name, and since it was pretty distinctive, I looked him up online. He was a federal appeals court judge. Now he giggles to himself and eats his boogers while going through the appeal matters and making crap ton of money. Such a good life. It's been 7 years and he still messages me on Facebook once a week. I haven't spoken to him or replied in 7 years and he sends me paragraphs of text. I see it as a dang game now. Freaking 7 years. WTF mark. I require examples to achieve climax. It's only a couple years out of high school at this point, but one of my good friends is high functioning autistic, and thus was considered very weird in high school. He's found a job stocking the refrigerators at a local supermarket and is enjoying that from what he tells me. He's taking classes on and off at a local university but doesn't know what he wants to go into. He's also getting into writing fanfiction and is continuing his passion for Lego. On a side note, his creations in Lego are super impressive, especially considering his limited resources. He discovered that he was better at interacting with computers than with people and became a software engineer. You just described my husband. Ran into him at a Costco, wrapping up a PhD at 25. Not bad at all. Wrapping up a PhD, I swear. Costco really does sell everything. There was a girl at my school who I will call Melanie. Melanie was easily the most socially awkward unaware girl I've ever met. Like, masturbating at school awkward. Picking her nose and eating it publicly awkward. By the end of high school, she had figured out how to not do these insane things that made people stare and laugh at her. But needless to say, she had a rough go. But she was also one of those people who was a really nice, genuine person. I moved away after college and didn't have FB until at least 10 years after graduation, so I had no idea what most of my classmates were doing. Maybe 5 years ago, I spotted her and friended her. She ended up marrying this guy who went to our school and was maybe 3 years older than us. I knew him from work and he asked me out at one point. He was also really nice, but super nerdy and socially awkward. I didn't think about it at the time, but when I saw she married him, I was like, oh my god, they are perfect for each other. They moved to a state that has a bunch of mountains and they don't have any children, so they're always posting all these amazing hiking and rock climbing adventures they're doing together. They go to all kinds of festivals together. Renaissance, I think, Star Trek, horror, etc. They look super happy and I talked to her grandma last year, who told me they're happy as clams. I'm just so happy for her. Masturbating and picking your nose to eat it should not be together ever. The type of weird that you wanted to have as a friend rather than not. I have a few too many stories with this kid in middle high school. He was a kleptomaniac, had illegal exotic and dangerous pets, obsession with knives weapons, had no regard for normal social standards and cues. Despite him being an innately skilled entrepreneur, he was a general menace to society. I went off to college and later learned his home was raided by ATF. His father had been manufacturing automatic weapons for the Latin Kings, and they charged him on an unregistered gun and potshroom chocolates found in his room. Last I heard of him after he got out of prison was on a flyer for a community board advertising basic around the house labor, with his head superimposed on a cartoon Superman. To be honest, that entire deal seems like the dad's fault. Imagine growing up in a setting like that. Phew. No wonder he was weird. Didn't run into him. Saw him on the news. Arrested for the hidden cams in public toilets for a P site and other nasty underage crap on his computer. This is the goodest flyboy. He will bring you 10 years of happiness in exchange for a like on this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.